very happy to be here with everybody. It's a fantastic occasion, and I'm speaking, even though I have an English accent, I live in the US, and I'm speaking about what's happening there. And, as you probably know, the US criminalizes the purchase of sex on top of the existing criminalization of sex workers. People talk about introducing the Nordic model, but in some places like Canada, it is the US model which has been introduced. And there is nothing that can be claimed about the US model that is any good. Under George Bush, the government's anti-prostitution and anti-trafficking policy became inseparable. So prostitution is trafficking, according to the US government. And it was massively funded by George Bush and used in a punitive and repressive way internationally. So this policy has set a standard internationally, a bad standard, and has sowed corruption internationally. His administration is known for a very unpopular pledge that you probably know about, the mandating HIV and AIDS groups to have a policy explicitly opposing prostitution and sex trafficking in order to get US government funding. And that policy still exists for non-US groups. In the name of rescuing victims of sex trafficking, US initiatives have led to increased arrests of sex workers working on the street, sex workers working in massage parlors, and they have nothing to do with trafficking. But the websites are attacked under this anti-trafficking push, where sex workers advertise, and they've taken down websites. And the premises where women work inside, women have been arrested, where they work more safely and independently. And as other women have said, it's black and immigrant women who are always first targeted, particularly women of color, under these anti-trafficking raids. Last month, the FBI's massive Operation Cross Country, which happens every year, it's a massive law enforcement operation. This year was to rescue sex-trafficked children. It took place in 135 cities. It was a classic example of exploiting people's justified horror at the abuse of children, really for another purpose and to blur the issues. If you take a closer look at that operation, it was just another crackdown on prostitution, both on sex workers and clients. Mostly adults who were arrested for various offenses, including prostitution-related charges, not having a massage license, probation violations, and drug-related charges. Anti-trafficking operations are similar to the war on drugs in the US, which criminalize low-income communities of color, and these same communities are getting the brunt of anti-trafficking enforcement. Nationally, black people make up 42% of all prostitution arrests, 38% of curfew and loitering arrests, 34% of disorderly conduct arrests, while black people make up 13.2% of the population. A recent human trafficking study in San Francisco, where I'm based, reported that 48% of traffickers are black. How can this be when 5.7% of the population is black in San Francisco? They've changed the trafficking laws now in California so that really anybody can be arrested as a trafficker. How can anyone, knowing that the war on drugs, how the war on drugs was enforced against the black community, can deny that this is not an example of racial profiling? Similarly, in New York, human trafficking intervention courts, this is the latest thing, have been introduced and touted as a national model. But those arrested for those arrested of prostitution by, quote, treating these defendants as trafficking victims. But reports show that nearly 70%, almost all women facing prostitution charges in the Brooklyn trafficking courts, are black. Operation Cross Country touted that 148 sexually exploited children were rescued nationwide. However, because federal law defines any person under 18 years old as a sex trafficking victim when arrested, it is unknown if any of these young people arrested were victims of trafficking. Many were likely homeless, teens, and runaways doing survival sex work, which studies show many do, and many are LGBT. These enormously costly law enforcement operations hide the reality that teenagers, some of them single mothers, are forced into prostitution because of poverty, destitution, and homelessness. When research shows that the number of $2 a day households in the US, $2 a day, has greatly increased, that is 1 in 25 families, and around 3 million children are living in such households, and many mothers are forced, as been said, to work in sex work to survive. Why isn't attention focused on this dire situation? Instead, a powerful lobby made up of the FBI, Interpol, Homeland Security, pro-criminalization feminists, like the very wealthy Hunt sisters, whose money comes from oil and real estate, are proposing and funding criminalizing clients as a way to reduce child trafficking. But there is evidence that shows that the laws criminalizing clients are being implemented in a discriminatory way as well. The first offender prostitution program in San Francisco, known as the John School, you have that here too, by its own admission, disproportionately targets Latino men and those living in low-income communities. So that, while money is being poured into consenting sex in the US under the guise of anti-trafficking, it's really discriminatory the way it's being forced, and as people have said, it's done nothing to do anything about real violence against sex workers. And I've got statistics about it, but that'll be for another time. Thank you.